Right, I think we can get started now. Thank you all for joining. Welcome back to Fundraising Friday. Very excited to go over major donor giving circles this week. A little background on the PMF team. This is all of us here. Introducing myself, my name is Kafili Thomas, he, him pronouns. I am the Director of Program Learning and Impact here at Progressive Multiplier Fund. And this is the entire team. You'll often see other folks joining us on some of these calls, usually my colleague, Polly Stamatopoulos. But I think I might just be rolling solo today. But a little bit more on who Progressive Multiplier Fund is and what we do. Our goal is to help organizations build a progressive movement of, by, and for everyday people. We do this by organizing and leveraging to create on-ramps for progressive organizations and to start, strengthen, or scale individual giving and earned revenue programs. And we do this through an online community of practice, of which y'all are a part of, and our grant making and support program. We aim to build the progressive sector's revenue generation knowledge and skills so it can amplify a people-powered movement. So we make grants in three primary focus areas: achieving justice, which is our civil rights-based work, realizing democracy, and restoring the environment. And what we really aim to do is to boost the capacity of organizations that work in these three spaces, seeing them as critical to creating the change that we need to see nationally and also globally. And we believe that through amplifying these organizations' sustainability, this is the most effective path for us to be a part of building sustained progressive power. A big thank you and shout out to our partners at Resilience Initiative, who have been the sponsors for Fundraising Friday, which is not just these training sessions. There's a little bit more that comes along with that y'all have access to, which I'll go into in the next slide. But if you haven't already, please do introduce yourself in the chat with your name, org, and role. As always, this session is recorded and will be uploaded to the Fundraising Friday YouTube channel. The link is down below, and share that towards the end of the presentation again. So as I was just saying, in addition to Fundraising Friday, you do have access to some capacity building support as well. So you can get up to 5 hours of individualized coaching, consulting, or deliverable prep. These are some of the things that we've worked on in the past. So please feel free to take advantage of that. If you have any questions, you can either reach out to Michelle Mengel directly or email myself or Polly. So it would be Kafili at progressivemultiplier.fund, and we can get you all set up for your coaching hours. And again, Fundraising Friday has 2 tracks this year. So the one-on-one track, which is working on fundraising fundamentals, and the 201 track, which looks at current trends, higher level topics as well. And again, if you want to look at past sessions, they're all uploaded on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to check that out. And the link is below, the bit.ly/fundraising-friday. So there's a lot of overall communication in fundraising around these new forms of giving. 2 of the biggest ones are DAFs and also giving circles. So what we'll talk about this week is what are giving circles, how do you find giving circles, and how do you sustain the relationships with giving circles. And then we'll leave some space for questions at the end for you to, if you have any experience with giving circles, or you would like to ask some individualized questions around that, we can dive into it. Yeah, Deborah, I will add the link at the end of the presentation. I just can't share it and screen share at the same time, but I will definitely add. So what are giving circles? Understanding what giving circles are, and what they can do for your organization. So structurally, giving circles are basically aggregated funding. So a group of people will come together to pool their resources, to make more impactful gifts than they would be able to make on their own. So what this does is, gives more funding or resourcing to the organizations that folks want to support. It also allows them to engage with the organizations at a deeper level, because it's more than just being an individual donor. You now have a collective of folks. So they kind of operate almost like a mini foundation. As a just general show of hands, you can throw an emoji up, or say it in the chat, or come off mute. But have folks had experience with either creating for your organization its own giving circle, or soliciting giving circles? And how has that worked for your organization? Okay, we're seeing no experience with it. Nancy, it's been mixed. Nancy, can you talk about what your mixed experience is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we're a small climate justice organization in Watsonville, California, and we were approached at least 2 times by 2 different circles, maybe 3 times. One is a shared plate at a Unitarian church. That one's been really terrific. They choose a group each month, and then half the proceeds that are collected are just given to that group. That one's worked out well. We've done that twice. The 2 others, we were chosen once and got some donation, but then like dropped completely, and like nobody stayed in touch with us. Nobody, seems to have wanted to continue, or to support, even as an individual, to support us in any way. So it's like every month, maybe they choose a different group, and that's it. And then the third one is, kind of a nice concept. I think it's called 100 Women Who Care. I don't know if that's bigger than just this area. Maybe it's a local chapter. But it just didn't really seem worth our time, because like you would show up for their event, and then they would like pick out of the hat 3 groups to be considered for that evening of the groups that were there. So just pure luck, you might get picked out of the hat, or you might not. And then of those 3 groups, you had to do a little pitch, and then the group would vote on which one they wanted to give funds to. So we went a couple of times, because it seemed like, well, you could come home with $800, or I don't know, a little more, but it's that element of chance I didn't really like, and I don't know. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I've never heard of kind of gamifying grants like that. That's a very interesting way of setting it up. I agree with you. I don't know if I particularly like that either. But yeah, so the thing about giving circles is they can kind of operate however they choose to. They're not really formal organizations in the way like foundations are, which have stricter guidelines as governed by the IRS for their nonprofit status. So they're a little bit more amorphous, and so the rules of engagement with them can differ by organization. There are some standards which we'll talk about later on in the presentation, but for the most part, there may be like, very unique situations such as that one. I've never heard of that before. Okay, so let's keep going. So let's talk about the history a little bit of giving circles and what it evolved from. So they've existed for actually individuals as an informal way of banking. So for communities in what folks would deem the global South now, for people who were disenfranchised, and for folks who couldn't access pooled money, what people would do is called like it was called like susu, which people still do today. So a group of people, like say your family members, friends, people in the community, everybody would throw in what's called a hand, right? So it could be $10, $50, whatever the case is. Everyone pulls that money together, and then there is a list in order of people who receive that money. So you continue to pay in, but every go around, you receive the lump sum. And so it was a way of saving and being able to get um, access to pool funding in ways that people just didn't have access to before. So it was like an informal form of banking. The concept was altered in the late 90s and early 2000s to really take that and apply it to giving and to philanthropy. So wealthier individuals would take the same concept, everyone pools in money, but instead of it going to another person, they would donate the money collectively as a giving circle to an organization. And so you saw it pop up primarily in cities of high wealth and high concentrations of wealth to be able to engage with philanthropy in ways that didn't require them to set up a foundation or to do a lot of the research on their own for like where to give money. So it's kind of a way of like splitting the work essentially. What we've seen now is that concept now become reabsorbed by the mainstream and by working class people as a way of giving as well. So not only as a way of informal banking, which still exists, but a way of giving. So people will unite, whether it's demographic based around a certain cause, to pool their funding and be able to donate directly to a cause, whether it's an individual, an organization, a movement group, whatever the case may be. So it's really like the first form of peer-to-peer fundraising. And so a little bit of like the characteristics and what defines a giving circle. There are usually some loose but agreed upon rules for a decision-making structure. Nancy, like to your point before, that whole gamification idea, like they came up with that and agreed to that. There isn't usually like bylaws like an organization, like a nonprofit would have about how these things and these decisions evolve. It's normally a little bit more loose and amorphous, but there is some agreed upon way of figuring out, how much are we putting in a person, how often do we put in, and where the money goes and how we decide that process. And there is also often some form of funder education. So unlike if you were applying to an institutional funder, which oftentimes you don't really do site visits until you're a grantee or something like that. You're often asked to come and speak to the giving circle in person to make either a pitch, to explain your work conceptually and what you're trying to do and why you need the funding. So one thing that's really nice though is for funding circles who are ingratiated in a certain focus area, they often tend to have for individual donors a very high sense of high level topics because they have had funder education from pitching, especially around a specific focus area. So they are groups that you can go to with a little bit more technical nuance, and folks will be able to grasp that differently as than if you were pitching just a regular individual giving campaign where you would probably keep things more broad and high level. So it's good for that type of stuff. Gifts tend to be larger because the entire circle gives in. And so depending on how many people there are, how much money is put in the increments, that's what you get. So if you compare it to the effort of putting in for an individual major donor contribution, it could end up being more if you get to a giving circle because it would be more people involved, and also expand your network because of the social organizing that comes with the giving circle. So like I said, oftentimes you're meeting with them in person at least once. You're able to connect with folks and also get exposed to their social circles. So there is a chance that you can become a repeat donor from a giving circle, get a chance to introduce your work to other people outside of the giving circle using it and as a outreach tool as well. And so another unique characteristic is often the diversity of giving circles. There can be giving circles that are made up with people from very different backgrounds, so you have access to different social groups. So if you are an organization whose donors tend to primarily fall within a specific demographic base, a giving circle could be an interesting way for you to get access to other demographic groups, and expand your individual donor base. There's also a lot of transparency within decision making, because it's a democratized process of philanthropy. So the goal in most cases is to improve access, or that's at least the intention. How that manifests itself in the decision making process sometimes isn't always the neatest or the most equitable way, but the goal of creating this type of philanthropy is to be a lot more transparent about decision-making processes, and to, reduce the barriers from organizations to receiving funding. Um, they are really great for strategic interventions. So if you're launching new programs, emerging work, exciting work, those are great venues to pitch that type of work, because it tends to excite new donors and get people to see their impact. So as a giving circle, being able to say that you helped launch a really effective program, or help, grow or scale some really emerging work, is normally like a real net plus for them, and so that tends to excite them. And again, the demographics of the group, they tend to form around common characteristics or goals. So it can be age. You see giving circles now emerging with a lot of millennials and Gen Z folks who either have access to wealth, or even working class folks who want to maximize their ability to give small dollar grassroots donations. So that can be a marker. Gender can be a marker for folks. Also focus area. So whether that is, a specific type of organization that they're seeking to fund, or want to create impact in a certain space. Okay. Any questions about the characteristics of giving circles, what they are, what they're intended for, before we move forward, and how to find them? No? Okay. So let's talk about how you would engage with giving circles and how to find them. Um, they operate very differently than individual donors and than foundations. So they tend to be kind of like a hybrid in a sense, but they oftentimes are connected to philanthropy, but at like institutionalized philanthropy, but at a smaller scale. So one great way of figuring out where this funding could be is connecting with community foundations. Oftentimes, community foundations host giving circles, or help pull giving circles together, because they are the philanthropic glue within a certain community. So you're not going to see it as much on the national scale, with like large size giving circles. Those tend to be, if those do exist, they are primarily started up by individuals who have access to a lot of wealth, and normally their own foundation to be able to like pool that funding together through their connections. But what we're talking about is like more everyday folks. Um, so community foundations oftentimes organize, host, and keep lists of local giving circles. So if you have relationships with your local community foundations, reach out to your program officer over there, see if they can connect you, see if they can give you access to the list that they may have. Or they may just know of who does know where that exists in your local community. Also, nonprofits themselves do host giving circles as a form of individual giving for themselves. So there are many organizations that do that to help bolster their individual giving. One organization that we work with, PowerShift, organized the internal giving circle to help really be able to do more funder education and like have a deeper connection with their major donors. They've worked with us to scale that work, and now approximately 20% of their entire organizational revenue comes from that giving circle. So it has grown over time, and also the size of gifts has grown as well. So that's something that does exist. You can start that one for yourself to organize your current funders, and it's a great way to help increase the gift that you're getting, or like standardize giving within your, especially your grassroots donors. But oftentimes too, nonprofit hosted ones are interested in learning, well, who else is in the field, who is doing tangential work that we can connect with. So even reaching out to some peer organizations and seeing if they know or have any giving circles themselves is a great way to gain access to some groups. There are a number also of online platforms that uh, folks who are interested in starting a giving circle can access and then use their tools to manage that giving circle. So what they do is folks will sign up online, um, figure out the structure, and the online service will actually do auto pulls similar to an auto pay on a bill. So say I was a part of the Progressive Multiplier Giving Circle, and we set it up on one of these sites, and we determined that we were going to give $50 every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, that would automatically pull out of my bank account and go into the fund. And then when we decide who we want to fund and put on our list, the platform will handle the actual transaction. So it makes it a lot easier for folks to access the concept of being in a giving circle, because they don't have to do the actual monetary collection, the management of the bank account, the actual donation themselves. This service handles it for them. So they also have directories as well of the giving circles that they manage. So these are four of them: Philanthropy Together, the Giving Circle Infrastructure Fund, Grapevine, and Charity Navigator. There are additional sites as well. You can just Google Giving Circle management sites and do some web searches on that to find other ones. And oftentimes their databases will allow you to filter their list. So you can try and find ones that are deeply or at least more closely aligned with your work. So you can do some research on who you would like to reach out to. Additionally, social media is a great way to find giving circles. A lot of folks, when they get to a more mature stage of running a giving circle, will advertise for new donors. So they want to increase the impacts of their gift. And so the two ways that they can do that is to either give more individually, which oftentimes they do, or to recruit new members. And they do that through social media pages for the giving circles. So Facebook is a great way to find them, but also LinkedIn as well. There are often many professional giving circle pages on LinkedIn. So feel free to use those as resources to figure out what giving circles exist. And especially on LinkedIn, because it's so professionally based, you may be able to figure out if you can get an internal connection to some of the people who are part of that giving circle based off of your own connections. So it's a great way to make an introduction, to talk a little bit about your work, and to build that relationship. There are also some philanthropic networks that exist that house giving circles within them. A couple of them include the Women's Collective Giving Grant Makers Network, as well as the Asian Women Giving Circle. These are examples of these networks that have smaller giving circles within them. And so they do the management, normally centered around, in both cases, women as the demographic group. But in the case of like Asian Women Giving Circle, obviously race being a demographic condition to joining as well. So if you are an organization that focuses on a certain demographic, whether it be age, race, gender, sexuality, chances are there is a giving circle that exists with based on that demographic group, or that gives specifically to that demographic group. It's just a matter of being able to find it. So you can also search online for philanthropic networks, and just doing some web research could put you in touch with the folks that you're looking for. Oftentimes too, because giving circles give year round, because of the flow of how they collect money and give out money, right? Normally it's like monthly or bi-weekly. They're always scouting and trying to find new organizations to give to, which means oftentimes you will find them at events and conferences. So going to fundraising and philanthropy focused events, you'll see oftentimes now they will have, when you go to a conference, you have your choices of different seminars and webinars that you can attend. We've been seeing more often now that there are like DAFs and giving circle specific content at these conventions. Those are great rooms to be in, even though you maybe on the fundraising side, a lot of the other people in the room will probably be seeking support on either how to start or scale their DAF or their giving circle. So take note of who's in the room, be able to try and make some introductions there, and that can open you up to access to, even if that might not be the giving circle for you, they may know peers who are doing and funding work similar to yours as well. Right? So now that we've covered, well, where are they and how do we find them? Let's talk about how do we actually get involved with them now. So applications to giving circles or funding circles can mirror the application process to institutional funding with some slight differences and caveats, right? But in general, there are some steps that you should be prepared at least to take in figuring out how to solicit a donation from a giving circle. The first thing that you really want to do is do extensive research on the giving circle's history. More informal giving circles will not have like a really strong web presence. Oftentimes those may be the ones that are hosted by a nonprofit or by a community foundation. So you can ask the program officer there. They oftentimes, as the stewards of the giving circle, will have anecdotal knowledge. How do they give in the past? How often do they give? What are they interested in focus area wise? What's the size of the gift? Have they been growing as a giving circle? Or are there any recent shifts in what they're interested in? You'll see oftentimes with giving circles, even if they have a stated purpose, because it's a small group, they respond often to huge changes in the socioeconomic climate. So if there is something that is dominating the news, maybe some form of disaster, tragedy, war, humanitarian crisis, they will pivot a lot faster than you would potentially see a traditional nonprofit that has more structure in it. The system that it's built itself into doesn't allow traditional nonprofit, traditional foundations and institutional funders to be as flexible, whereas giving circles can and do pivot quite often. So once you figured out who they are, essentially, we have to identify like what is the best form of contact for them, and how do we do our outreach. So email and LinkedIn are great ways to figure out who's involved in these giving circles. They're often on LinkedIn part of people's pages because it is like a very professional thing to be connected with. So if you can find the name of the giving circle, even if they don't exist as a strong web presence, they may be something is in their LinkedIn resume. So you can search the name of the giving circle in LinkedIn and see if folks are self-identifying as part of that group, and being able to reach out through that. And so the preliminary contact would um, be to this point person through which you are really introducing yourself and your organization's work, and asked to meet to figure out alignment both with your programming and what they are interested in funding. Um, Want to keep that super high level, maybe talk about your biggest win of the past year, or like what you're working towards heading into 2024, just so they can get a general sense of what size and scope you work at as well, and that can often help pique their interest, or at least let you know whether they're interested in funding maybe your particular angle or way of going about the work. So from there, after that intro call to be able to gauge alignment, oftentimes it would be invited to submit an LOI. So if you've written an LOI for a foundation, same kind of process, but oftentimes a lot more informal. So just a short description, written form. I know a lot of them take videos now as well, and like having mixed media to be able to look at the work that you're doing visually, but basically just describing your work, what size, scale, and scope you operate at, and what your goals are going forward and what you're seeking funding for. Um, the proposal step, some giving circles have a full proposal for their own keeping. Some of them don't. Some of them just go straight into the presentation or pitch. But if they do, expect a more expanded version of what the LOI looked like, similar to how it would look like for if you were seeking an institutional funding. One thing about the proposal process as well is that more established giving circles, larger giving circles, are going to tend to ask for the proposal process because their chances are giving out more money, and or have just more regimented systems than maybe some of the smaller, more informal groups, which are more keen to just getting money out the door, where it's more about storytelling than maybe formalized paperwork behind the gift. Um, but one thing that is a shift, as I said before, is the presentation stage. So there's often an in-person pitch component to it. So the giving circles often meet in person. So being prepared to be able to pitch your work in person and answer questions in a group setting is something that is incredibly important if you're going to try and solicit these types of gifts. So normally the process would be for recruitment on their side. Um, Folks will do their own scouting and research about who they would be interested in funding. And then during these meetings, they would make decisions on, who we would like to invite to a LOI, make decisions on whether the LOI deserves further merit, and inviting folks in either for a proposal and or the presentation stage, and then also in those meetings, hearing presentations from groups that are on the verge of potentially getting funding. So being in that space, being comfortable, speaking to not only the contact that you have there, but the additional people in the giving circle, and being able to answer multiple questions is definitely something that you're going to need to be able to do if you're going to be successful at giving circle fundraising. Any questions about the solicitation, about any of the resources that we have on the list of like how you can find giving circles and things of that nature? No, no questions today. Y'all are quiet today. We're gonna breeze through this. We're gonna have a lot of time for Q&A at the end, I guess. We can use that time however we see fit, and open it up beyond giving circles if we need to. Thank you, Deborah. Trying to be. Um, So let's talk about, once you've made those inroads, you've gotten your first gift. Like Nancy, to the situation you were in before, where you got one gift, and maybe crickets after that. How do we potentially try and sustain that relationship and think about it that way? One thing that we have to remember about giving circles is, by the very nature of how they're set up, um, there is a chance that maybe you don't get funded again, right? They have a list of groups that they're trying to work through to spread out their money, and they're always going to be prospecting for new groups. So it's very different than an institutional funder, which has KPIs, which is looking for return on investment, and you can kind of build a rapport, especially if you're doing campaign-based work, something longer term, longer framing. They are, by the time you're getting your grant, there's already a bunch of other months already pre-planned about who's going to get funding or who they're in conversation with. So by the very nature of the work, it is difficult to reliably expect recurring giving all the time, or at least in a yearly cycle, right? Because that would mean they're only funding 12 groups. There are some of them who do like multi-year, so they pick like 12, right? If they do monthly, right? And then they'll fund those 12 maybe for like 2 years or 3 years, and then they cycle them off, or they do some sort of staggered version of that. That's like kind of an ideal situation because you can build a rapport with them. And what you can also do is, even if they only fund you once, you now know that there are X number of individuals who have made the decision to fund your work. So people who give in giving circles oftentimes are individual donors as well, maybe on a smaller scale, but they are folks who you should still build a rapport with and a relationship to feel like you can come back to post or even during donor circle relationships as individual donors. If you have people who in that meeting you can tell are like the most excited about your work, make a mental note of that. Try and bring them on, maybe to join a membership program or to be an individual donor at a later date. But these are just some tips and things that we'll go over here that will really, increase your chances of becoming a repeat donor from the donor circle. The first thing is just make sure you fulfill your requirements to the best of, your ability. Meet your deadlines. If there is any reporting requirements, make sure you do that, and do that maybe early. Ensure that you're a great steward of the grant. Communicate well with professionalism and give regular updates. Share milestones and challenges and really ingratiate them into your work. Oftentimes, as grant writers, as fundraisers, our job is really to think about the next dollar, right? And where's the next folks that we have to solicit. But by taking the time to stand out and really engage with current and former funders during times where you're not actually soliciting them, you're keeping them informed about the work, builds that rapport, shows that you care, shows that you're an organization that has their stuff together, and it's really just trying to build a deeper relationship on a personal level with the potential donor. So please go ahead and like build that rapport in your giving circle solicitation, but also if you have the capacity, is something that you should do with your institutional donors and your major donors as well. Don't just hit people up when you need money from them. Build a relationship with them, and you're much more likely to actually get that money in the long term. Provide recognition in ways that make sense for the giving circle as well. Some giving circles want to be anonymous. They do not want to put themselves in the front, right? I'm sure we all have experience with major donors like that. So make sure that your development team, if you get a gift, is aware of how the giving circle would like to be acknowledged. But if they do want to be acknowledged, make sure that you do that in ways that boost their profile, show appreciation for their support. For instance, if, like we said before, you're pitching something new, something exciting, and you do like a newsletter, easy way to do that. Thank you to the Women's Health Giving Circle for their support in launching XYZ, right? Little touches like that, and making sure they're on your mailing list so they can see that. And even asking their consent or asking how they would like to be acknowledged or recognized, goes a long way into building that rapport, showing that care. As well as invite them to site visits the way that you would donors. If you do any special events, galas, things of that nature, invite the giving circle as well. Make sure that they feel plugged into your organization in general. Another way to plug folks in is offering them volunteer opportunities, and seeking their feedback. If your work lends itself to volunteer opportunities, they've already shown as individuals that they care about the work that you're doing. Give them a chance to, get involved in a deeper level. Having them come be a part of the work itself, meet the folks that you work with in the community that you serve, gives them a chance to really put a face and a name to the work, builds that deeper rapport and affinity for your work, and allows them to develop, even deeper respect beyond just giving, with the work that you're doing. And it really puts memories and good experiences in their mind. And so if and when you come up for funding again, that's what they are going to remember more than anything about their relationship with your organization, was that time that y'all spent together. So if you can, and your work lends itself to that, create those opportunities. And even if it doesn't, when you're sharing your progress, when you're sharing the challenges that your organization may be going through, actually ask them for their feedback, and based off their experience, what they see in other groups that they fund, what they think, it makes them, a valued member of the community, again, beyond just gift solicitation. So they'll feel more ingratiated, and then they'll want to know, hey, did you end up taking our advice? How did that work out for you? Were there challenges that we didn't know about, right? That we can bring back to our other grantees. And so you're really building a community of learning and building connections within the giving circle as well. And it's also a great way to meet peer organizations too. If they are a focus area focused giving circle, chances are they're going to be funding groups, especially if they're a smaller one and more locally based, that may be working tangentially with you. It would be a great connector tool, the giving circle, to meet peer organizations, figure out ways that you can potentially work together, collaborate, even do joint fundraisers. So think of it not only just for the gift, but for the the connective tissue as well. And so through stewardship, you can also provide educational opportunities for the giving circle. So as we talked about before, you're going to spend potentially a lot more in-person time with the giving circle than you would your typical institutional funder. You're going to have that presentation. Probably your report back is going to be, in-person verbal report back. But in the meantime, try and meet with them. Invite them, like I said, to site visits, invite them to volunteer, share updates of your work. If you are doing, whether it's a form of organizing work, or maybe you are working on policy, or you are, even direct service or direct action work, regardless of what you are doing, take the opportunity to inform the giving circle about your work, about your framing and your worldview and why you structure your work the way that they do. Share some impact stories from staff, volunteers, community members to really drive home the effectiveness of your work, why funding you was worth it before, and why they should continue to fund you in the future. And great. We are super early, so we can leave a lot of space for some questions on giving circles, talk a little bit more maybe about y'all's experience, or I know there were some folks who don't have experience. If you have additional questions, I'm happy to take those. And then After the Giving Circle conversation, if we just want to open it up around fundraising, I know Giving Tuesday is coming up. So if folks have questions about end of year fundraising, I'm happy to spend some time answering those as well, or any other questions that you may have. But thank you for listening, and I hope this introduction to Giving Circles was useful for you. As I said before, this will be on the YouTube channel, and I will put the link in the chat once I'm done screen sharing, which I probably will stop now because we have no more slides. Yes, Nancy.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk some more about the forming of relationships within Giving Circles, because kind of the impression that I've gotten is that people just want to be part of that group and don't want to be contacted individually, or don't want to be solicited, aren't necessarily looking for anything more. And I mean, I tried to, with one which was years ago, getting a one-time group donation. I tried to engage with some people, put them on our some people seem to want to be on the email list, or had some of that contact that wasn't just all about soliciting, but kind of have never heard anything more from
Yeah.
there again. And it sort of feels like maybe people want to just kind of hide in a group, and they don't want to be hounded by organizations.
Sure, 100%. So, I think in every group, there's going to be like a gradation of folks, like just like in your donor base, right? You're going to have folks, even if they give it a high level where they're like, this is my gift. This is what you're getting this year. This is what you're getting next year. Don't solicit me. I'm going to send it on December 31st every year, right? You just have those type of people, and they do exist in donor circles as well. But you can also, I would say, like, using context clues of when you're in the room too, like who seems to be the leader of the donor circle, who seems to be like engaging and organizing the group. Those are probably the people who are going to be the most amenable to additional outreach, right? And so I would say if you had to choose where to start with those folks, and try and build a relationship and a rapport. And again, treat it similar to you would an individual donor, right? They literally just gave to you, right? So you're not gonna ask them for a second gift right away. What you may want to do, give them some informational stuff, or give them an opportunity to get involved, right? And just gauge it from there. And what you really want to do is figure out what level of affinity they have for your organization. Do they feel really strongly? Are they super warm to your advances? Or if not, maybe it's a more hands-off approach. Hey, here is just a quarterly newsletter about what we've been up to, and just, try and build that response. Happy to do a one-on-one with you after. And then after time, when that relationship, you can tell and feel that relationship is more warm now, that's when I think you would feel or be more successful at maybe a second pitch or asking to be an individual donor as well. You still, even though they have donated through the Giving Circle, you still have to like do those levels of stewardship with them as an individual, to really have a good sense of who they are, what they're about, and whether they would give as an individual or give again.
I have more questions, but I want to see about other people before I say anything else.
Sure.
Sorry. Oh, I do have a question in terms of like optimal like org size, budget size for like Giving Circles, because some that I've seen around, they're like, oh, for more like much smaller organizations. So, and how we could go about if I have a larger budget.
Yeah, for sure. That's also a very good flag. A lot of the informal giving circles, because of the size of the gifts that they're able to give, because they're giving so many, they really want to feel impactful with their giving. So they tend to give to smaller, newer organizations, because that's where they feel like they're going to get the most bang for their buck. If they don't have like a hard, we fund $500,000 organizations and below, right? Say they just want to fund like new emerging work. I would pitch a program rather than the organization as a whole. So like I said, they get excited about new things or about really impactful things. So rather than thinking, fund my $1.7 million organization, fund this particular program. We're trying to make some inroads in this community. You're members of this community. We want to pitch it to you, as community involvement. I would kind of go that angle more. And that was the strategy I would have rather than your whole organization.
And then just a quick follow, like if we do that, then it's like restricted funding, like we treat it like restricted.
So yes, correct. Oftentimes giving circles will just give GOS a grant, which is also very nice. But if you do pitch a specific program and they give for that specific program, technically that is a restricted grant and you have to use that money specifically on that. But what's nice is if you were going to do that anyway, what it does is free up the general operating support money you were going to spend on that. So it could still work out and allow you the flexibility that you want. You just have to be cognizant of how your other fundraising is going as well.
Thank you. Helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Nancy, you want to ask that follow-up?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the how to allocate the time that's needed to build all these relationships, to bring in the amount of funding that you need to bring in. Like, I mean, how does every organization manage this? And I'm glad to see there is a partial trend in philanthropy that's more towards just getting money out to organizations, not making them jump through hoops and, prove their worthiness in all these different ways. And it's just, we're a small but growing organization, and the fundraising is just absolutely overwhelming, really. And I know I'm not doing the level of relationship building and meetings with people that we need to do, but like we're trying to do some work too. So I don't know. I like the trend towards some of, kind of trusting organizations and recognizing that wealth really, historically was stolen from people, and it'd be nice to kind of be returning it with fewer strings attached and all of that. But I think it's kind of a small trend. So
yeah,
I
100%.
just feel like, from everything you described, I mean, it makes sense to do what you're saying, but like all of that work to get maybe $600 from one giving circle or something, or I don't know, $1,000, $2,000, and then all this follow-up to keep nurturing the relationship in the hope that they might give you another $500. Like,
Yeah, 100%. And giving circles may not be for everyone, right? This is just an introduction to how they work, what they are, and if you did want to engage with them, how you would go about that. As I've been a fundraiser and grant writer since I was 17 years old, I know firsthand for my entire adult life how exhausting being a fundraising professional is, right? And so what I always tell groups that I work with is start small and do what works for you with the capacity that you have, right? I'm a big advocate of the snowball method, right? So we want to work as efficiently as possible. Fundraising staffs are often undermanned. We only have 40 hours in the week and are susceptible to high burnout. So why, in your case, right, maybe a giving circle, you're not ready to invest all that time. That time would be better invested in institutional funding or starting an independent revenue generating program, working on recurring giving, right? And so that's like kind of the analysis that as fundraisers we have to make. But I always tell folks, start small and build your way from there, build confidence, right? Even with the programs that you build. If you do an individual giving campaign and it's your first year doing it, would I expect as, if I was to like audit your giving practice and it was your first year doing it, that you'd have a perfectly segmented list with individual asks going out, with organizational history that goes to your CRM? Would that be nice? Yeah, you'd be a rock star if you were able to do that. But chances are you can't do all that in year one, right? So just get the asks out, get emails out, and right, we need to bring the money in. Then maybe in year two we can look and be like, all right, cool, what worked really well, what didn't work well, what's one big change that we could make to refine this process. And so this is like year by year, over time, we'll have that refined, really amazing giving program that's robust. But I think oftentimes like these trainings can like be overwhelming or daunting because we're talking about everything that you can do. But what you should do is like whatever makes the most sense for you at the time, and like whatever you have the capacity to do, and then build out from there. Melanie, yes.
Hi. I was just wondering, when you talk about researching and finding the funds or the giving circles and who they might be interested in giving to, what are some of the ways you do that? Because when it comes to sort of like soliciting donors, like foundations, we use Instrumental and they have donor profiles. So I can kind of go through their 990s and see, and I work at an abortion fund. So I generally am looking for like Planned Parenthood is my like key that I look for, because if they'll give money there, then like we're in their scope. But what are some of the ways that you would think about like trying to find which members of giving circles or which giving circles would be interested in that type of work? Because especially like my work, it's very niche. So, just trying to like figure out what that might look like in terms of trying to research it.
Sure. So and we're gonna share these slides after. But what number is this? 16, the online platforms that we talked about that give you the ability to like set up the giving circle virtually. They also have repositories and directories on there of the giving circles that they support, right? And so you can go on there and oftentimes filter by focus area, by demographic, by what they're interested in, and get a list of them, and often contact information through there. Also, I would say reaching out again to your community foundations. If you're are you a national organization or?
No, I'm based in New Mexico, but we mostly serve Texans. So we tend to kind of focus on reaching out to funders in Texas because they're the majority of the population we work with.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say community foundations in the major cities in Texas, especially. I live in Dallas, so Dallas has a number of community foundations. Austin, even Houston, San Antonio, which is closer to you, El Paso. I would say reaching out to community foundations there, trying to build a relationship with them, and figuring out if they have local giving circles who are interested in potentially supporting your work would be a great way to do that. And also, as a side note, do you have access to the Foundation Center?
I believe so.
Okay, so I will put the link in the chat. Give me 1 second. I just have to find it. So the Foundation Center has a lookup tool. You can find people's or organizations 990s, but what you really is a underrated tool that I don't think people use enough is the Foundation Directory. So I'm gonna put the link in the chat, and what you can do with that tool is if you hit the advanced search, when you open it up, you can search in that box to find like, you can describe your work in multiple ways and see who funds your work, but you can also reverse engineer other people's funding sources. So if you hit search by organization, and under organization name, you can put in like Planned Parenthood, right? And all of them will pop up, but look at like recipients only. So you can say, okay, the Planned Parenthood in San Francisco or New York City, right? You can open that up and it will tell you who gave them grants and for how much money. So you can also use that to reverse engineer from your peer organizations, like who's funding them that we didn't even know about, or who else is in this ecosystem who's giving out grants that we don't have a relationship with. So you can get a wider sense of who the grant makers are in your ecosystem. So that's another thing that I would suggest for institutional funding that folks do.
Just as a question, do you have an idea of like what percentage of money I should be allocating for like my development program on these sorts of tools? Because our program grew really large really quickly. And so we're kind of playing catch up. And even I really like the instrumental platform, but that was like a big cost. It wasn't something we previously were using GrantStation, and I didn't love it. I like instrumental a lot more, but it was way more expensive. So even just looking at the foundation directory, I think that we decided not to renew because Candid now charges for it. And so it's kind of like a decision of how much money to spend on tools. And it's not something that we've had to think about in the past. Like, do you have an idea of like maybe what the sort of like return on investment would be for those kinds of tools, and what like I should think about allotting how much of my program to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if you are an organization that has multiple programs, I would in development maybe try to be aligned with their programmatic overhead. So like all programs have costs, right? We as directors of our departments or EDs, whatever your role is to like determine what the biggest bang for your buck and what you need the most is, right? So I would say there's tons of for-profit organizations that are all trying to like milk our organizations for money, right, for these tools. So I would say think about my main questions that I would ask myself are, how do I currently make money as an organization and invest in tools that allow me to do that the best way that I want to? And also my secondary question is, how do I want to make money, right? Is the way that I'm making money as an organization or resourcing my organization ultimately the way that I want to stay? Do I want to diversify? Do I want to change, right? And if I do, then further investment in tools that will allow me to diversify and change, like whether it's wealth engine that allows you to get better insights on individual donors, things like that, right? Then that might be worth the investment. But it's similar to like what kind of funding you choose to pursue, right? You can do anything you want. You can't do everything though, right? So you don't have the staff time to do individuals, recurring donor, throw merch together, do giving circles, right? So figure out how you want to raise money and get the best tools to help you do that. And that also have ease of use for you too. So like if you like instrumental and it's been good for you, keep rocking with that. You don't have to get new things or everything. These are just, other options that you may have.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Sure. Any other questions, either about giving circles, about fundraising in general, end of year? How is Giving Tuesday plans going? Do we have our emails prepped and our media put together?
I could ask more about trying to do something on Giving Tuesday. And what I've been hearing is that instead of having such an emphasis on like, here's our impact and here's why you should give with us, more like user-generated content. But what exactly would that look like? Is it like, people who've already volunteered with us or donated to us saying, I'm giving because something like, is it that kind of thing, like holding up a sign? How would you go about that? But that's what I'm hearing is maybe a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think user-generated content is always great. The main things that I would check for is that it is authentic, and you have enough content to do a campaign around it, right? If you're gonna put in all this effort to like generate user-generated content, and you can get 3 posts out of it, it may not be worth it. But so for instance, one group that I consult with is a trans-led organization, and so they do peer support and also do micro grants to trans folks in need. And one campaign that we're going to roll out this year is user-generated content from staff, volunteers, and recipients of like what has the organ meant to them in their life, and talking about how their life has been changed from like being related to this organization, from the different axes of working there, receiving money, calling the hotline and getting the socio-emotional help that they need, or volunteering there. And so running a campaign to really, what you would want to do is like really speak to the human nature of your work, and have people relate to it on that scale. So really showing how effective you are and like what kind of world you're trying to build. It should always, in that type of stuff, add up to like your overall mission vision is like kind of the theme that you would want to really go with, and explaining like the work that you're doing to push the world that way. Erica, I see your question here. Outside of Giving Tuesday, last 3 days in December, what are the best days or times to send emails and or post on social media as for end of year? The rest of December is the answer. I feel like people start on Giving Tuesday, do a blitz on Giving Tuesday and do like 7 posts, right? Or emails, crickets, and then come back December 29th and then blow people's email up again, right? You should continue to ask throughout the month of December. Like, it's the season of giving. And we also know that, you know, for email answer rates, like 10% would be great, right? So chances are 90% of the folks who you emailed on Giving Tuesday didn't even see it, right? So you have to make sure you're trying to get eyes in front of your product, right? So if you really think about it, only after your 10th email can you really feel a strong guarantee that everyone in your donor base may have seen at least one. So I think as fundraisers, we have this like apprehension of hitting people up or feeling like we're bothering or annoying people, right? And I think that there's different ways that we can do it. Not every email in December has to be give me money now, give me money now. Like, share end of work, share one of those impact stories we talked about. If you have that user generated content, throw one of those in there, right? So maybe once, twice a week, you're reaching out to folks and letting them know what you're doing, or like talking about your future work in 2024. What's this leading up to? Throw some asks in there, and then do your heavier direct asks during those times. But at least that way you have a constant stream of communication with your donors throughout the month of December. And you're getting the eyes that you need in about your organization, because also everybody else who they've ever funded is doing the same thing too. So not only do you have to just get the original eyes on it, you have to drown out kind of the noise of other organizations as well. So that's kind of what I would do. Hi, Deborah.
Hi, so we're participating in Giving Tuesday this year. It's the first time I think this organization has. And we've been doing social media pitches around it. I hadn't thought about doing an email specifically because we've been doing fall appeal emails and letters and things, just fall appeal in general. So is there a moment when it's too much? Like, so if I'm doing, the social media thing, I hadn't thought even about sending out an email, nuttily enough. But like when is it you've gone too far?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something that like I think folks like uh struggle with. And you'll be able to tell because your donor base will tell you. So the things that I would look for, I would continue my plan and try and like do the outreach, right? Because you also have to think too, if I'm on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, right, and I'm on at the wrong time of day, or the algorithm doesn't show me, I didn't even see your post, right? So in our head, we're like, oh, we reached out 20 times in the past like 4 weeks, but like I saw like 2 emails, maybe saw one thing on Twitter because I happened to be scrolling by, and that may be like all that I've seen, right? So um what we send out and what the donor base receives are two totally different things. And the donor base will communicate with you when it's too much. Things that I would look out for: emails, stop emailing me. Unsubscribes, lower click-through or open rates, right? When those start to tank a little bit in like noticeable amounts, maybe like in the beginning of the campaign, or you have historical data, like normally folks open like 8%, right? If maybe that drops down to like 4, okay, maybe we need to take a pause here and like give some air and come back in a couple weeks, right?
Okay, so we're making it a Facebook event, and which I think Facebook now you can't post something until 2 weeks prior, like make an event. And so that window, if we were to do an email blast as well as the social media blast that we're doing every day, say, just as an example, between now and the end of November and a little bit farther along, you think that is a good idea? I mean,
Every day for email might be a lot.
okay, but a few times.
A couple times a week, start of
Mm-hmm.
the week, end of the week, uh,
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
some days of gaps in between, with different content too, because that's
Mm-hmm.
also the thing. Like, if I'm going to go through reading your emails and you're sending me the same email every week, I'm automatically going to see the
Mm-hmm.
next one and be like, no, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
reading that. I already know what that is, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you can build different engaging content where like if I open one and then the second one is totally different, like we said, right? Maybe the first one might be about 2023 accomplishments. The second one might be impact story.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is 2024 goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different types of content. Then I'm going to be like, I'm learning more about this organization rather than they want me to give, they want me to give, they want me to give. All right, I'm going to give, leave me alone, right?
Yeah, what I've been doing is doing a little video thing with some of our board and people who work with us. It's like, here's why I love this organization and what giving means. So I thought that we would use that in social media, but now I'm like, oh, well, maybe we'll put that into an email. And
Mhm.
a little video pops up and it's like our board of directors that says, hey, give to us, because it's a great organization, something. Anyway, thank you. You're giving me lots of good ideas.
No worries. And you can also multi-use content, right? So just because something's in an email doesn't mean you can't post it on socials and vice versa. So
Mhm.
feel free to use and shorten or lengthen clips if you have video or audio that suits the format that you want
Mhm.
to use it.
Mhm.
I,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, no problem. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name right. Is that Elise? Are they as for year end?
Yes, you pronounced it right. Thank you for
Okay.
asking.
No worries. What in specific are you like looking for? Like how to set up year-end appeal, or like when you should reach out to folks? Is that like kind of what we're talking about?
Well, you've already provided some general tips, which I've found to be helpful. Thank you. But I guess where I when I say we, I really mean me because I am the entire development team. But
Uh, I know how that goes.
so right, so I just kind of started creating a framework for our year-end appeal. And we do kind of a longer first email blast and then several smaller ones, generally weekly. And I guess I just wonder if there's any particular type of content that is the juiciest or the most compelling for donors. And then I suppose outside of the email blast and the digital correspondence, the human to human side of things, just kind of reaching out to prospective or current individual donors to either get them to donate for the first time or recurring time or increase their donation? Is there any type of tips and pointers on, in addition to what's the juiciest digital campaign, but what are some tactics around that human to human cultivation?
Yeah, for sure. So I think as far as like where you can focus your efforts like digitally, folks really engage well with multimedia. So if you have pictures of your work, if your work is stuff that like lends itself to being photographed in the sense of like you're in public, there's people doing things, or if you have video, those are always great to share because people don't like wordy emails or like don't like wordy long social media posts. So short and concise with the words, but by throwing multimedia in there and including a picture at least in every email, you're giving something to break up the words and also still giving them content without them having to read. Is I think a way of, you know, really connecting with people and make sure that it's accessible. Oftentimes with our work, like how we talk about our work, like peers, talk to your donor base, like, you know, they may not really have the nuanced language that you have. So there are like those tools where you can like tell the reading level of like what you write. For emails and solicitations, I would not go above like a 5th grade reading level. You want to keep it like, you know, as like accessible, I guess I would say, as possible. For the individual donors, like it's a great time to reach out is the end of year. Just being cognizant of like families going on vacation, that type of stuff. Sometimes it can be harder to reach people at the end of the year. So if you were going to devote time to it, I think right after folks get back from Thanksgiving is a great time to reach out. Like, so early December, doing a phone-a-thon is a great way to get your board involved. Like, start doing some phone banking, give them like pitches that they can feel comfortable talking to former donors or like prospective new donors and be able to spend that time on the phone with folks. It's a great way for them to get involved, to steward your donors, and also like make the best use of your time. Hope that helps.
That was great. I feel like I could ask a whole follow-up question on board fundraising engagement, but thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And again, we have those strategic assistance hours. So I put the link above if you want to pick my brain, Polly's brain, some more, feel free to sign up for those so we can talk one-on-one about your work. Erica, I know you have another question here. What is the standard format for ask emails? We are planning to send an email 2 weeks prior to Giving Tuesday and want to keep ideal format in mind of terms of content. So what I would say, I would say no more than like 3 or 4 sentences in a paragraph. You really don't want long paragraphs. You also don't want it to be too long. So if you do like the test email and you have to go past like 2 scrolls on both your phone and your laptop, like also remember a lot of people check this stuff on mobile. So make sure if you're using pictures, if you're using media, it's mobile optimized and shows up nicely on mobile. Otherwise people will ignore your emails. That would be my framework: short, precise, something in the middle, image, chart, video, whatever, to break up the text, and donate button, big and bold at the bottom. Break up the text with italicized, with bold, with underlines, with colored font. I don't like highlighter. Highlighter feels very political donation addy to me. But colored font sometimes looks nice, especially if you have like a logo and you have like a theme. if you bold and color like the most important like sentence or like your ask, that's often good as well. Is that helpful, Erica? Is that like kind of what you were looking for?
Yes, that is very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Okay. I know we have a couple minutes left. We can ask some more questions. If folks are done, again, really encouraging y'all to join us for the next fundraising Friday, which will be on the 17th. We're going to talk about dynamism, planning for that, and funder shifts. And also would really love for folks to, again, if you have additional questions, sign up for our strategic assistance hours. I'm gonna put the link, the sign up link again. And we can help y'all out individually. But thanks so much today and for engaging with this, and hopefully see y'all in a couple weeks. All right, bye.